Hey everyone, Cynics here. Today I'm going to try and improve your art skills by giving you 3 tips about drawing and painting shadows. These are based on common mistakes that I see all the time, but they are also just a helpful checklist that you can keep in mind every time you're drawing and painting. Diving right into it, number 1 focuses on detail. So let's do a quick test. I'm going to draw a quick stylized face with a line right down the middle, implying there is a shadow covering exactly 1/2 of the face. Now, without adding any value, which side of the face is in shadow? Hopefully you're saying the one on the right. Why? Because it has less detail. Another quick test here to demonstrate again. By eliminating detail entirely in certain areas, it infers in our brain that these are in shadow, especially when we know there should be detail there. I'll make a slightly fancier face drawing now to really discuss this. Now, I could just add a shadow to this without any regard to the line art, and that looks okay, but we want to really improve our skills. So let's think about this in a more painterly way and remove most of the detail that's in the shadows. Now you could debate over which looks better, but this is mainly an exercise to train our brains into becoming more painterly and adaptive. And yes, being painterly is very fancy. So let's break down the key fundamentals going on here. Human vision consists of light rays bouncing off objects and into our eyes. The less light bouncing off of something, the less visual information we will receive from it. Therefore, less light means less details. Now, to be fair, because of bounced light, this wouldn't mean that there are no details, but art is about enhancing various aspects of vision, such as the interplays of cool and warm tones, the science of lighting, all that stuff. It's up to the artist to enhance these theories and make them a little more fancy than they are in real life. And for the record, I am leaving touches of ambient occlusion in a lot of these shadows, just a bit, for science. Anyway, there is at least one important exception to be aware of, and that revolves around dynamic range. You camera nerds will probably be perking up right now because you know what I'm talking about, but just a quick and ugly explanation. Have you ever walked into a dark room and not been able to see anything? At least maybe for a few minutes, and then your eyes adjust and suddenly you can start making out details in the darkness. But oh no, someone came in and turned on a bright light and your ability to see in the light is completely blown out and everything is pure white. Well, this ability to see details in either just the light or just the dark is what you might refer to as a shift in the dynamic range. Technically, it's just the dilating of your pupils, but it's a similar effect, and it's a much bigger problem with cameras. Anyway, if you did have to do a very dark scene with a bright light being introduced on the character or whatever, you could represent that with a lack of detail in the light area and details that only exist in the shadows. In some sense, they're not even really shadows at that point, but you can think about that on your own. Okay, I talked about that part a little bit too much, so let's actually paint out this face a bit. We'll zoom through this at maximum speed to get a rough pass on this painting. We're not worried too much. I'll try to fix up my skewed leaning proportions a bit. They're really pretty bad. I really should have flipped the canvas earlier on, but oh well. Anyway, as fun as it is to implement these painterly shadow ideas into your line art, these concepts are extremely important when you get to actual painting. And I'll just keep it completely honest again, a face wasn't necessarily the best place to demonstrate this idea. We are very accustomed to seeing faces in a pretty high dynamic range, especially in a portrait shot. But regardless, I guarantee this concept of painting far less detail into your shadow areas will make your larger illustrations and environment pieces, and really all of your paintings, to start to come to life. You can focus a bit more on just ambient occlusion and let those details just sink away into the shadows. You know who does a really good job at this? Well, most professionals do, but my friend Dylan Chunachat comes to mind. His life drawings tend to let the shadows just soak up all the details. Anyway, it's really going to start bringing you amazing results when the shadows of separate objects and pieces start merging together. Which brings us to our second tip, shapes. Let's be realistic, we're often not going to have the foresight to plan our shadows into our initial sketches and doodles of faces or characters. It's not completely a bad thing because it at least allows us to have full adjustable control over where the lighting actually goes. You get to make a whole new art piece on top of your previous art piece by trying to figure out the most aesthetically interesting shapes you can create with your shadows. And shadows really are great for shape design. You can approach them like a pure graphic element, a stylish second skin to be placed on top of the form. Famously, you might have heard of such ideas as the Rembrandt triangle, which I spelled wrong here for some reason, but Rembrandt was notable for often placing the lighting in such a way that the light would touch the further cheekbone and form a simple triangular shape. It's just good graphic design, trying to create simplified and appealing shapes. Now, if you're just trying to show an innocent or lovely face, you might find that you should focus on shadows that only frame the outside of the face and don't create too many lines or shapes that might interrupt the simple rounded features. However, if you're feeling like having some fun, you can get ambitious with your shadows and employ large, chunky shadows to bring forth all sorts of fun graphic shapes. I can't stress it enough, you should always be treating them as design elements and focus on the keys of good shape design. And I still haven't made a video on that, so just use your imagination for now. No, I can let you know at least that shapes should be minimal with large, simple, obtuse angles, which make them very inviting. So combine things wherever you can and avoid thin lines. Simplification is always key to shape design, so find a flow to the shapes that doesn't leave little stranded pieces and chaos everywhere. Also, throw in some big, medium, small wherever you can. If you're feeling confident, you can even outline the new shadows and start taking details out of the shadow shapes you created. Relating to both of these first two tips, part of this shape stuff also gets into combining shadow shapes. So let's do more combining. I'll doodle a dumb vehicle design here, and while I do that, my mind drifts back to the words of a wonderful watercolor artist who mentioned that a car and its shadow should always be looked upon as a singular shape. The shadow was not some separate entity that existed outside of the car. No, from a painter's standpoint, seeing the world in only color and value, the shadow of a car is just as much a part of the car as the wheels are. In respect to that, I often like to ignore ambient occlusion and let the wheels of a vehicle melt straight into the shadow without too much line or detail keeping them apart. It's a very minor abstraction of reality, but as artists, we crave abstraction of reality. So plants and foliage are always a source of chaos for a lot of paintings and a lot of artists starting out. Some people try to focus on every leaf and shadow, but once again, an artist is here to just distill things down, so combine and simplify those bushes into spheres with crazy textures. Group as much into one single shadow shape as you can, and just when you think you've done too much, merge that shadow into the ground plane as well. We are trying to evolve past the lines that separate objects in our minds. All we want to see are the lines that separate giant ranges of value and color instead. Alright, let's come back down to reality a little bit. Topic number 3 is also a good one. Color. Another very simple concept that you might be overlooking simply because you never considered the most basic rule of all. And I'll get to that rule in a second, but first I'm going to paint a white surface here in a red room. Now I'm going to add a white ball on this white surface, and for fun, let's add a shadow as well. Look at that, I even combined my shadow shapes like a true painter. Now go ahead and guess what I did wrong. I'm sure plenty of you are onto my tricks, but let's take it a step further. Right now, it would seem from my painting that there is a direct spotlight shining on our ball here. We didn't really think much about ambient light, so let's just turn off that spotlight. In this red room with no direct light on our ball, it would certainly be a lot darker, but it would also be getting lit from all of that red light bouncing off those bright red walls everywhere. To be fair, I should have made the room darker. It's pretty unrealistic as it is, but bear with me. I'm lazy. So our white ball is now just dimly lit by all that ambient red light. Now let's turn that spotlight back on. Obviously the dark parts wouldn't change. Light is purely additive, So we can just bring all of our white where the spotlight is hitting, and it should be done. Alright, this is all starting to sound very patronizing, so let's just spit out the basic rule that I alluded to at the start. The shadow color is the ambient color. So what color should your shadow be? Well, whatever the ambient color of your setting is, along with maybe some bounce light factored in. I want you guys to tell yourself that every time you ever paint a shadow, the shadow color is your ambient light color. Let's do a quick demo with a cube. Are you, say, outdoors under a blue sky? Then blue shadows. Are you in a boring, colorless warehouse? Then you can have your gray shadows. Are you in a warm indoor environment? Warm shadows. Here's a curveball. Outdoors, but sitting on the grass. Well, still a blue cast shadow, but bounce some green up onto that cube for a little bit of fun. Just please stop putting gray shadows on everything. Ambient colors are subtle, but let's keep things from getting too lifeless. And once again, art is about enhancing the science of reality. So identify your ambient light and crank it up a bit. It can be pretty fun. Alright, I'm wrapping it up. So those are my 3 tips for improving your shadows and hopefully improving your art. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll try to be back with another one soon. I would like to thank you all so much for watching, and of course give the biggest love to my Patreon supporters, who are my little tether keeping me from drifting off into the depths of space. See you, everyone.